The morning sun spread across the skyline of Abuja, painting the rooftops gold as the city came alive. Hawkers called out in the distance, cars honked impatiently, and a faint smell of roasted corn and exhaust filled the air. Inside a modest apartment in Kubwa, Rose stood before a mirror, brushing her sleek hair and humming softly. Her reflection glowed, not just from her natural beauty, but from the quiet contentment of a woman who believed she had everything she needed. Her husband, Emeka, was a hard-working man, tall, humble, and devoted. Though his job as a civil servant didn't bring much money, he poured his heart into caring for Rose. Their marriage of 5 years wasn't perfect, but it was peaceful. Emeka never failed to tell her, "Rose, one day we'll have our own house, even if I have to build it block by block." That morning, he was getting ready for work, adjusting his tie with tired eyes. "Rose," he said, "I might come back late today. They said there's a new file that needs to be sorted before Friday." She smiled faintly. "Again? Emeka, you work too hard. That office will not kill you." Oh. He chuckled. "If I don't work hard, who will pay for that new blender you said you wanted?" Rose laughed, brushing his shoulders. "That's not the point. I just want you to rest sometimes." He kissed her forehead gently before leaving. "I'll rest when my queen is smiling in her own house. I love you." As the door shut, Rose stared after him, half touched, half tired. She admired Emeka's loyalty, but sometimes she wished for more. The good life, the flashy cars she saw women driving in was, the classy restaurants and designer bags. Deep down she felt a void, and soon something, or rather someone, would come to fill it. Later that week, Rose visited Bella's boutique in Was too, a classy place she often admired but rarely entered because of the prices. Her best friend, Amara, had convinced her to come just to window shop. As they browsed the glittering racks, a man's deep voice broke through their conversation. "Excuse me, ladies, can you help me pick a scarf for my wife? She says I have no fashion sense." They turned and Rose froze. He was tall, dark-skinned, and wore a well-tailored navy suit that screamed money. His smile was confident but warm. His wristwatch alone could pay her rent for 3 months. Amara giggled. "Ah, sir, you asked the right people. Oh, my friend Rose here has perfect taste. She can help you." Rose shot her a look, but smiled politely. "All right, let's see what color she likes." He grinned. "Anything that makes her look as radiant as you." Rose blushed. "You flatter too easily." "Not flattery," he replied. "Just honesty." He introduced himself as Mr. Tun Balagan, a real estate developer. His wife owned a small spa in Maitama, and he claimed to be just killing time before meeting her. But from the way his eyes lingered on Rose, it was clear his interest wasn't casual. They talked for a few minutes about fashion, Abuja traffic, and work. His charm was magnetic, his confidence disarming. When he left, he slipped her a card. "Call me sometime, Miss Rose. I'd like to show you some properties, or maybe just buy you lunch." She hesitated but smiled politely. "We'll see." When he walked away, Amara leaned close. "Babe, see that car he entered? That's a 2024 Range Rover. That man get money die." Rose rolled her eyes but pocketed the card. "Amara, he's married." Amara shrugged. "So? You think men like that just fall from heaven every day? Look around. Life no day wait for loyalty. Oh." Rose laughed it off, but the words lingered longer than she expected. That evening, while Emeka sat cross-legged on their couch, calculating expenses, Rose couldn't stop thinking of Tund. His smooth voice, his elegance, the ease with which he moved through life. She imagined herself sitting in his car, attending business dinners, living free of the constant budgeting and sacrifices that defined her marriage. She told herself it was just admiration, harmless curiosity. But a few days later, curiosity turned into action. She called him. "Hello, Mr. Balagan?" His laughter came warm through the line. "Ah, so the beautiful Rose decided to remember me." They met for lunch the next day at Nkoyo restaurant in Was. It was the first time Rose ever stepped into such an upscale place. Polished tables, calm music and soft lighting. She wore her best gown and felt like she belonged there. Tund was smooth. He spoke about success, travel, and dreams. He told her, "Rose, you deserve more than waiting around while life passes you by." When she mentioned her husband, he chuckled. "He sounds like a good man, but does he see you? Truly, a woman like you should be cherished, not just tolerated." Rose tried to protest, but deep down, something in her broke. For the first time, she questioned her marriage not because it was bad, but because it wasn't glamorous. Days turned into weeks and lunches turned into dinners. She began lying to Emeka, saying she was visiting friends or attending a women's fellowship. Tund showered her with gifts, perfumes, jewelry, and occasionally, cash to spoil herself. Her world began to change. She smiled differently, she dressed differently, and soon people noticed. "Rose, your skin is glowing." "Oh," Amara teased one afternoon. Rose laughed shyly. "It's just better lotion." But it wasn't lotion. It was the thrill of attention, the warmth of luxury, the feeling of being wanted by a man who seemed to have it all. Meanwhile, Emeka noticed the distance. She no longer asked about his day. She sighed when he tried to touch her. Dinner conversations faded into silence. One evening, as they sat in front of the TV, Emeka reached for her hand. "Rose, what's going on with us? You seem far away lately." She forced a smile. "Nothing. I'm just tired, that's all." But even she could hear the lie. That night, she dreamed of Tund. His cologne, his promises, his wealth. When she woke, she looked at Emeka sleeping beside her, and guilt pricked her heart, but not enough to stop her. A few months later, Tund called her with an excited tone. "Rose, I want to see you. I have something important to tell you." They met at his private office in Maitama. Spacious, beautifully furnished, smelling of new leather and expensive perfume. He took her hand, looking into her eyes. "Rose, I can't keep pretending. I love you. I want you in my life." She stared, stunned. "But, your wife." He sighed dramatically. "My marriage has been dead for years. She's more like a business partner now. We live under the same roof but different worlds. You're the only one who makes me feel alive again." Her heart pounded. "Tund, are you saying? I want you to be my wife. Once I end things officially, I'll marry you. You deserve that." Rose's mouth went dry. The words, "I'll marry you," echoed like music. Tund continued, "You shouldn't waste your best years in a marriage that doesn't fulfill you. Leave him. I'll take care of you." She didn't give an answer that day. But that night, she lay awake beside Emeka, tears rolling silently down her cheeks. His soft snores filled the room, the sound of a man who trusted her completely. And in that trust, she felt trapped. Weeks passed. The affair grew bolder. Rose started spending nights out, claiming to stay with Amara. She came home with new shoes, new wigs, and a phone that Emeka knew he didn't buy. When he finally confronted her, she exploded. "Why are you always monitoring me, Emeka? I'm not a prisoner." He stared at her, broken. "Rose, you've changed. Is there someone else?" She turned away. "Maybe I'm just tired of struggling. Maybe I'm tired of pretending that love is enough when I can't even buy simple things without begging." Her words cut deep. Emeka stood still, speechless, watching the woman he loved turn into a stranger. That night, she packed a small bag. She told him she was visiting her cousin in Garki for a few days. But she didn't go there. She went to Tund's apartment. He welcomed her with open arms, champagne, and soft music. "You made the right choice, Rose. You'll never regret this." But somewhere deep inside, her heart whispered, "You already will." A month later, Rose returned home only to find Emeka sitting quietly, holding an envelope. "I know everything," he said softly. "I know about Tund Balagan." She froze. He looked up, his eyes red. "Rose, I loved you with everything I had. But if another man makes you happy, I won't stand in your way." He slid the envelope toward her. Divorce papers. Tears filled her eyes. "Emeka, it's not what you think." He interrupted gently. "You don't have to lie anymore. I forgive you. But I can't keep holding on to someone who's already gone. For a long moment, silence filled the room. Then, with trembling hands, Rose signed. When she walked out that door, she told herself it was freedom. But her heart felt strangely hollow. Tund had promised her a new beginning, a life of luxury and happiness. She told herself this was her second chance at love. But deep down, something felt wrong, like stepping into a beautiful house built on sinking sand. And soon, the cracks would start to show. The morning after the divorce, Abuja looked brighter than ever to Rose. Tund had sent a driver to pick her up, a sleek black SUV with tinted windows. Her few suitcases were neatly packed, her wedding ring left behind on the kitchen counter like a memory she no longer wanted. As the car glided past the city's clean roads, she smiled faintly. For the first time in years, she wasn't thinking about bills or Emeka's tired eyes. She was thinking about freedom, glamour, and a new chapter. When they arrived at Tund's house in Guzape, Rose couldn't believe her eyes. The mansion was breathtaking. Tall white pillars, a shimmering pool, expensive cars parked neatly in the driveway. The scent of wealth lingered in the air. Tund stood outside waiting, dressed casually in a white shirt and black trousers, smiling like a man who had just fulfilled a promise. "Welcome home, my queen," he said, kissing her hand. She laughed softly. "You really meant it? Didn't I tell you? You deserve the best," he replied. For a while, it felt like a dream: dinners at five-star restaurants, shopping sprees at Jabi Lake Mall, weekend trips to Lagos. Rose was living the fantasy she used to imagine while Emeka was counting coins at home. But dreams, as beautiful as they are, have shadows. 3 months later, the mansion that once felt like heaven now echoed with emptiness. Tund was changing. He came home late, smelling of perfume that wasn't Rose's. Phone calls ended abruptly when she entered the room. His warmth faded, replaced by irritation and cold silence. One night, Rose waited up for him, wearing a silk gown he'd bought her. When he finally arrived, she asked softly, "Tund, what's going on? You've been distant." He gave her a sharp look. "Rose, not now. I'm tired." "But you promised." He cut her off. "Promised what? To babysit you? You're acting like a child." His words cut deeper than she expected. Tears filled her eyes, but she said nothing. The next morning, she found a message on his phone. "Last night was amazing. Can't wait to see you again, baby." Her hands trembled. The name saved under the message was Cynthia, HR. A week later, Tund invited some business friends over for dinner. Rose spent the whole day preparing, cooking, arranging the dining table, wearing her best dress. When the guests arrived, she smiled politely, serving them wine. But as the night went on, she noticed the way one of the women, the same Cynthia, leaned close to Tund, laughing at every joke, touching his arm. "Who's that?" one of the guests whispered. "Oh, that's Tund's new girlfriend," another replied casually, not knowing Rose was within earshot. Her face went cold. The laughter around her turned into echoes. She looked at Tund. He met her eyes, then looked away. After they left, she confronted him. "Tund, how could you embarrass me like that in my own house?" He smirked. "Your house? Don't forget, Rose. Nothing here belongs to you. You came with nothing, remember?" Her knees went weak. "You said you loved me." He shrugged. "People say many things when they're having fun." That night, Rose cried herself to sleep on a couch that wasn't hers, in a house that wasn't hers, beside a man who no longer cared. Within weeks, everything changed. Tund started traveling frequently, leaving her behind without explanation. Bills went unpaid. The maids stopped coming because their salaries weren't settled. One morning, a loud knock jolted Rose from sleep. 2 men in suits stood at the door with documents. "Good morning, madam. We're from Zenith Bank. Mr. Balagan's property is under foreclosure." "For what?" she stammered. "Foreclosure. This house is being repossessed." Her chest tightened. There must be a mistake. But there wasn't. Tund had mortgaged the property months ago. He was in debt, heavy debt. And now he had vanished. Rose sat on the marble floor, trembling, as movers began taking furniture out. Everything she thought was hers, gone in hours. By evening, Rose found herself standing outside the mansion gates, clutching a single suitcase. The driver was gone. Her phone had no airtime. She walked for hours through the Abuja streets, past people who didn't care to look twice. Rain began to fall, cold and heavy. Her makeup washed away. Her shoes were soaked. For the first time in her life, she realized how far she'd fallen. Not just financially, but spiritually. She had left a man who truly loved her for another who only loved what he could take. As she wandered into the night, she thought of Emeka. His smile, his gentle words, the envelope, the forgiveness in his eyes. Regret hit her like thunder. She whispered through tears, "I destroyed everything good in my life." But there was no one to hear. Hours later, she collapsed under a small shed in Garki. An elderly woman selling roasted corn found her, drenched and shivering. "Ah, my daughter, what happened?" the woman asked softly. Rose looked up, unable to speak. The woman covered her with a wrapper, gave her a piece of corn, and said, "Whatever chased you out of your comfort, may God bring you back home." Rose wept. It was the first time in months that anyone had shown her kindness, and it came not from wealth or beauty, but from a stranger with nothing. Days passed. Rose stayed with the woman, helping her roast corn and clean. At night, she lay on a mat, staring at the stars, replaying every decision she had made. Her heart ached for Emeka, not because she missed the comfort, but because she finally understood what real love looked like. Quiet, patient, and forgiving. She tried calling his old number, but it no longer connected. So she wrote him a letter, a long one filled with apologies, memories, and tears. At the end, she wrote, "I left peace chasing happiness, but all I found was emptiness. If you ever see this, please know that I am sorry." One evening, she walked past Giuseppe again. The mansion gates were locked, the compound overgrown, and the windows dusty. She stood outside the rusting gate, remembering the day she had arrived full of hope. She realized the house had always been hollow, just like the promises that built it. Tears streamed down her face as she whispered, "I traded love for luxury, and lost both." Weeks later, Rose found a small job in a salon in Woods. She didn't have much, but she worked honestly, saved carefully, and smiled again. Faintly, this time, but truly. Every morning, she looked at herself in the mirror, not to admire her beauty, but to remind herself never to let greed blind her again. The scars of her choices remained, but she carried them with humility. Her story wasn't over, but she knew now that redemption begins when pride dies. Months passed. Abuja's dry season heat pressed against the city like a heavy blanket, but Rose didn't complain anymore. Her life had become simple, almost painfully so. She rented a small one-room apartment behind a local market inn with Zone 4. Peeling paint, a shaky ceiling fan, and a small mattress pushed against the wall. Every morning, she woke up early, swept the compound, and prepared for work at the small beauty salon where she had been hired as an assistant. She earned little, just enough to eat, save a few naira, and send small gifts to the old woman who once sheltered her in Garki. There were days she caught herself crying quietly at night, remembering her old life. The marble floors, designer clothes, fine restaurants. But those memories no longer filled her with pride. They filled her with shame. She had traded love for luxury, and luxury had turned to dust. Now, as she looked at her reflection in the mirror of the salon each morning, she whispered to herself, "This is who I am now, and that's okay." One morning, as she was sweeping outside the salon, she saw a little girl selling groundnuts with her mother nearby. The girl smiled at her shyly. Something about that smile reminded her of what she once had: love, laughter, and peace. For the first time in years, she smiled back. It was a Saturday afternoon when fate decided to stir her past. The salon was busy. Women gossiping, dryers humming, and soft Afrobeats playing from a small radio. Rose was washing a client's hair when she heard a familiar voice at the reception. At first, she thought her mind was playing tricks on her. But when she looked up, she froze. Standing by the door was Emeka. He looked different, older, calmer, but stronger somehow. He wore a neatly pressed shirt, his hair slightly grayer, and his face bore a quiet peace. Their eyes met. Time stopped. "Rose," he said softly, his voice both familiar and distant. Her hands trembled. "Emeka." For a few seconds, neither spoke. The noise of the salon faded into silence around them. Finally, he smiled faintly. "I heard you work here. I just came to see how you're doing." Tears welled in her eyes instantly. I'm fine," she stammered. "You look good." He nodded. "I'm okay. I moved to Guarimpa. I started my own printing business. It's small, but God has been faithful." Rose could barely breathe. She had imagined this moment 1,000 times. Rehearsed apologies, begged in her mind for forgiveness. But now, faced with him, all words failed. "Emeka, she began, but her voice broke. He smiled again gently. "You don't have to explain. I forgave you a long time ago." That made her cry even more. He looked at her, not with anger, but with pity. "I just wanted to be sure you were okay." Before she could say anything else, he gave a small nod and turned to leave. She wanted to run after him, to fall to her knees and beg. But something inside her told her she wasn't ready yet. That night she didn't sleep. His face haunted her. His forgiveness, his calm, his kindness. All of it broke her in ways Tund never could. That night, Rose lay awake, staring at the ceiling fan as it creaked rhythmically. Her mind drifted back to their early years. Emeka carrying her on his back when they returned from the market because her slippers had broken. His laughter when she burned stew and nearly cried. His tired but proud smile when he brought home a small fridge they'd saved for months to buy. He wasn't rich, but he had been hers, and she had thrown him away. She pressed her face into her pillow, sobbing silently. God, why did I let him go? But the truth was simple: greed, pride, foolishness. She remembered Tund's house, the laughter that wasn't real, the perfume that wasn't hers, the house that wasn't theirs. Every memory of luxury now tasted bitter. She promised herself, if I ever see Emeka again, I'll tell him everything. Even if he never takes me back, he deserves to know how sorry I am. 2 weeks later, fate granted her wish. She was walking home from work when a familiar car slowed beside her. The window rolled down. It was Emeka. "Need a ride?" he asked softly. She hesitated, then nodded. As she sat in the passenger seat, the smell of his cologne, gentle and clean, brought back a flood of memories. He drove quietly for a while. Then he said, "I read your letter, the one you sent months ago." Her heart stopped. "You got it?" He nodded. "Yes, took me a long time to read it without feeling pain. But I did." She turned to him, tears in her eyes. "Emeka, I don't deserve even this conversation. You gave me everything and I threw it away. I was blind." He kept his eyes on the road. "Maybe you were, but you've suffered enough. I can see that. I don't expect you to forgive me," she whispered. "I just want you to know, I never found happiness. Not once." He exhaled slowly. "Rose, I forgave you because holding anger was killing me. But forgiveness doesn't mean we can go back to what we were." Her tears fell harder. "I understand." He stopped the car near her street and turned to her. "You've learned. That's enough. Don't punish yourself forever." Before she could respond, he gave her a soft smile. The same gentle, selfless smile she had fallen in love with years ago. Then he drove away. She watched the car disappear down the street, her heart breaking and healing at the same time. Days turned into weeks, and Rose poured herself into her work. She became one of the best stylists in the salon, her kindness and humility drawing customers to her. She started mentoring younger girls, warning them gently, "Never let greed blind you. Love is worth more than luxury." Her life became a quiet testimony of redemption. Every Sunday, she attended a small church in Utako, where she sat at the back, always crying quietly during worship. She no longer prayed for wealth, only for peace. One afternoon, she was closing the salon when the little groundnut girl from earlier ran to her. Auntie Rose, my mama say thank you for the food you gave us. Rose smiled warmly and bent down. Tell your mama I say God bless her. As the girl ran off, Rose felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Contentment. She looked up at the Abuja sunset, orange and gold painting the sky, and whispered, I may have lost everything once, but I found myself again. One quiet evening, a courier stopped by the salon. Are you Madame Rose? He asked. Yes, she replied cautiously. He handed her a cream-colored envelope. When she opened it, her breath caught. It was a wedding invitation. Emeka and Kem, with joy in our hearts, we invite you to celebrate with us. For a moment, her hands trembled. Part of her heart cracked again. But this time, it didn't shatter. She smiled sadly, whispering, he deserves happiness. That night, she placed the invitation beside her mirror, not as a reminder of loss, but as proof that life moves on. And forgiveness heals even what love can't. On the day of the wedding, Rose didn't attend. Instead, she went to church. She sat quietly in the back, hands clasped, eyes closed. Lord, she prayed, thank you for sparing me. Thank you for teaching me what love really means. And bless Emeka. He was a good man. Tears rolled down her cheeks, but they were no longer bitter. They were cleansing. When she stepped out of the church, she saw the little groundnut girl again, waving at her. Rose smiled, a real peaceful smile. She had finally found closure. Months later, Rose saved enough to open her own small salon, Grace Touch Beauty Studio. On the day of the opening, she placed a framed quote on the wall. True beauty is not in what you wear, but in how you love. Business grew slowly but steadily. Women came not just for hairstyles, but for advice, for comfort, for Rose's calm words. Sometimes she told her story, not all the details, but enough for people to learn. And every time she spoke, she said the same thing. Don't lose a diamond while chasing glitter. Her name became known in the area. Madame Rose, the gentle stylist with wisdom in her eyes. One late evening, she sat by her mirror, combing her hair slowly. Her reflection looked older, softer, and wiser. In her small apartment, a framed picture of her and Emeka from years ago sat on the shelf. She smiled at it, not with regret this time, but with gratitude. You taught me what love is, she whispered, and I finally learned what it isn't. As the night breeze blew softly through the window, Rose closed her eyes, finally at peace. She had lost everything once, but now she had found herself.